Yo, what is going on, everybody? It's your boy Aaron B, and welcome to Tacos and Touchdown Live. And okay, we're live now, so it'll lag it a little bit, and had technical issues and everything, but it's all good. And I got my guy Shane Carter, a man of many talents, and I appreciate you, bro, for being on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me on again. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. So Cowboys have actually been pretty busy this off season. They usually not doing too much, but they've been on the grind this year. I'm surprised and I'm excited to see what's going on. But I wanted to get your honest opinion. What you think about this?
You know, not only was I surprised that they've been active, but I was surprised at how early and active they were in free agency. Pretty much the first week they made headways because I think a lot of people didn't expect Donovan Wilson to get re-signed, but he gets signed for that 3 years, $24 million deal, and it was key because the Cowboys went in with four high priority defensive free agents. One was Donovan Wilson, Leighton Vander Esch, Dante Fowler, and Jonathan Hankins. And following today, all four are back with the Cowboys. And on top of that, you know, the Cowboys got better in two of the three areas that they were the weakest: receiver and cornerback. Trading for Stephon Gilmore and trading for Brandon Cooks, which amounted to 2/5 and a sixth combined. Stephon Gilmore's contract, you can get out of it next year if you want to. Cooks, they have him through 2024, which is a good deal because he's going to be an upgrade for what, at least perceived off what Michael Gallup gave you last year. He still has plenty in the tank. He's had inconsistent quarterback play in Houston, but for the most part, he's actually had a really, really solid career. One of the more underrated players in the league. And what's so great about acquiring them is you improved the cornerback and wide receiver room, but since you did it through trade, it didn't affect your comp pick formula. And that's key because since they allowed players like Connor McGovern and Dalton Schultz to walk in free agents, it's subjective whether or not you wanted them back at all. But since you allowed them to walk in free agency, you would theoretically get two comp picks at least for those two, and we'll see how the rest of the offseason finishes out for him. I know that one more player that really like to have back is Carlos Watkins, who would really solidify that third nose tackle along with Quentin Bahana and Jonathan Hankins.
Yeah,
But if the Cowboys decided right here, right now, that all their focus is going to be on the draft, they're not going to make any more free agency moves. They'll worry about that maybe after the draft is done. This has been by far one of their, at least in my opinion, their best looking free agency period that I've seen in years.
I agree. I can't even think the last time we had this good of a free agency moves and trading involved. And also, I just looked up on Dallas Day. Ty Montgomery, a Dallas native, is actually going to be working out during Dallas Day, so that could be a possibility.
A former Mike McCarthy pick back in the days of Green Bay.
Yeah, you're right.
And if they added him, they brought back Rico Dowdle, excuse me, and then they obviously they brought back Tony Pollard on the franchise tag, and they signed Ronald Jones off the streets. And I'm almost positive they're going to use one of their 7 draft picks on running back. So they're looking to reestablish that running back room. Right now, the only running back that you can safely say will make the roster next year is Tony Pollard. He's on the tag. He's $10 million against the cap. He's going to be there. It ain't a for sure fact that Dowdle, Malik Davis, Jones, Quadri Allison, doesn't matter who comes in from camp, is there's no guarantee they're going to make the roster. But the Cowboys typically keep about 3, maybe 4 players on the roster. Usually that third or fourth guy has to play special teams, and your first 2 guys are your primary ball carriers. I think, and Stephen Jones even talked about it, is that in an ideal world they could pair Tony Pollard with a big power back, and so we're seeing a lot more of these mocks where they mock these bigger ball carriers like a Zach Evans from Ole Miss, or the Tank Bigsby from Auburn, Roshan Johnson from Texas. These names that we hear because the Cowboys are moving more into that new type of backfield where you have your main guy who's a speed guy who can also catch at the backfield, and your second guy who is a short yardage guy who can also be a good blocker. Sort of what Zeke was for him, but obviously a little more younger, a little fresher legs.
Yeah.
It looks like that's where they're headed.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that in. So that was our second thing is, like you were saying, Stephen Jones said they're talking about getting more of a physical back. So what are like 3 running backs in this draft that you would be interested in fitting that mold?
Okay, so I mentioned one I like is underrated back, and I can get on day three, possibly even undrafted, depending on how deep people think this running back class actually is. And Roshan Johnson from Texas,
Yeah.
people spent a lot of focus on Bijan Robinson, and for good reason. Bijan Robinson, a lot of people are saying is going to be the next Adrian Peterson type running back, this generational kind of guy who can
Yeah.
sort of a do it all kind of running back, and it's understandable. He's a fantastic player. Roshan Johnson is very much more of a security blanket type of running back. I watched a little bit of his tape. He doesn't stand out the way Bijan does, but he does a lot of the little things right. He gets you those hard nosed in between the tackles type of runs. He's a solid protector in the passing game. He's not really going to be much of a receiving threat. He can catch the ball, but he's much more of an asset as a pass blocker. And more importantly, is that he can actually be an asset for you on special teams, which as a rookie, as your second, possibly even third running back, he's going to have to do anyway. And so that's going to very much be a plus for him as being one of those guys. Um, another guy. Since you're talking about a big kind of bruiser back, I mentioned Evans from uh, from Ole Miss at one time from TCU. He might be actually a guy who you could actually split carries with Tony Pollard and eventually become the uh, the takeover back next year, assuming that there's no long term deal done with Tony Pollard. You can never really tell with running back deals. You don't know how much he's gonna earn in the free market. You know how much the Cowboys are gonna get for him. I do know that with Tony Pollard commanding that much money and coming off the season he had, Tony Pollard was fantastic. He was easily one of the 3 or 4 best running backs in the league. So you want to give him the ball, but you also don't want to make the same mistake that they made beforehand with Ezekiel Elliott, where you ran him into the ground. What made Tony Pollard so valuable was that like he was great for what he did, but you didn't need to use him as often. Evans kind of gives you that Ezekiel Elliott type of back. Obviously not the upside of Ezekiel, but very much like has the durability of someone who can be a physical runner in between the tackles. And my favorite running back, Bijan Robinson is everyone's running back one. My
Yeah.
running back two, even above Jamar Gibbs, I had this guy above him is, and he's not really a physical power back, but he's a guy that I think you could be a physical runner who I think could eventually be the Cowboys number one next year. Tyjae Spears from Tulane.
I
I think
agree.
he I think
I
he had a
agree.
I think he had a great time at the Senior Bowl. To me, he has some of the best combination of vision and balance in the draft. I think he has some of the best footwork, especially after missed tackles, because he caused a lot of missed tackles. He's an underrated receiver. A lot of people want these new running backs to be guys who can line up in the slot, but he's very much a valuable receiver out of the backfield. And even though he didn't have this sort of amazing 4.3, 4.2 speed, I think he ran a 4.4 something. I wrote it down, but I don't have it with me. He's like a high
Yeah.
4.4, but it was very much good enough. And he has what's even better than that is he has game speed. And you know that game speed, if you can maintain it the way he does, that can very much be a valuable asset moving forward. And so, even though he wouldn't necessarily fit the mold of a power back, combining Spears with Pollard to me would be the best case scenario.
Yeah. And the best thing they worked him out. And I would tell somebody that haven't watched his film, watch him at USC. He was
Yes,
that's one of his
It was
best
it was
games.
amazing. It might be in terms of like all the running back film that I've seen in terms of like who they played. I don't know if it was the best, but it's definitely one that stood out.
Yeah.
Definitely one that stood out. Like him against USC, you're right. He showed balance. He showed power. He showed vision. He showed patience in between the tackles. He showed speed. He was. I mean, it's ironic he was playing against USC, but he looked almost Reggie Bush esque in a way.
Yeah, I
And
can see
I'm
that.
not comparing him to Reggie Bush. I'm saying he stood out in that kind of way.
Yeah, that's what I noticed in his film is like he does a little bit of everything, kind of like how Reggie Bush did a little bit of everything at USC. Uh,
Right.
so definitely agree. One guy that I wanted to bring up is Mohammed Ibrahim from Minnesota.
Love him.
Yeah, he's that goal line specialist guy. He was tied in rushing touchdowns with let me see 20 touchdowns this year. It's that goal line specialist type of guy. He's 5'8", 203, that low center of gravity type of guy. And he'd
Hmm.
be a good rotation with Pollard. He'd be that second or third running back.
And low center of gravity is actually a good way to put it, just because, like you said, at 203, he'll probably bulk up to 210 by training
All
camp. A
right.
lot of these running backs, like a lot of these players, like to bulk up a little more as they get down there. But like at 5'8", hypothetically 205, 210, all that weight, and you see it in the film, is like in his legs. He has that Dak
Yeah.
Prescott kind of look where he has very thick legs. He's a hard runner, like you said. He won't blaze you away with any sort of speed like that, but he's very hard to bring down. He's a lot shiftier than you initially would think, especially just by
Yeah.
looking at his stature. But he has a lot of shiftiness, especially like in going to that second level against linebackers. So I like him a lot. And another guy that I kind of like, and I don't know if you ever heard him at all. His name is Keon White. He's the running back from Georgia Tech, and now Georgia Tech obviously has a history of like kind of having these underrated players really make it into the draft. No one really
They
thinks
do.
about. I think he could be a nice day three addition. I think more often than not he would be a player that you obviously would have to have a third running back where he would be the guy kind of coming off the bench, playing special teams, doing the dirty work kind of player. He wouldn't be a true running back two right off the bat, but I think he'd be an interesting player if you didn't get in the draft or as an undrafted free agent as a solid addition. Think him in the same light as a Malik Davis, but at the same time, thinking about that, if you already have a Malik Davis, do you really want to go back to that same guy? But I do like his potential as a rotational running back, especially as like a special teams guy, because the Cowboys the last couple of years have kept extra running backs, extra receivers as special teams players because they want those guys who have that longevity kind of speed and sort of. And I think that he might be one of those guys you can consider later in the later rounds.
I definitely agree. So the next thing I want to talk into is I was telling you, let's do like a mock draft. Like, what would be your perfect mock draft? So I'll let you go first, and we'll go with the first round. So who would be your first round?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna do this in two different ways. All right.
Okay.
So the first thing I want to do is before we actually make one ourselves, I want to give you one that I actually wrote down. I did a mock draft for a new website that I write for called Defiant Takes Football,
All right.
and my and I didn't do any trades. So my and I'll give you my first three picks, and you
Okay.
can tell me if you like them, heard of them, whatever like that. If you would change one, let me know. We can go on some of that together. So my first pick, and it's a guy that I've been standing on the tower for months. I was on this guy's train for forever, and people are just now talking about him being a first round pick. Guard Steve Avila from TCU. To me, he is the best interior offensive lineman in the draft, above Osiris Torrance from Florida. I know John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota is getting a lot of love, but to me, Avila is the best. He is the best combination of balance and pass blocking skills. He has plenty of nastiness in the running game, plenty of strength. He's saying about 6'4", I think 330. I don't have his measurements right in front of me, but he
Three
has
thirty
the
two.
yeah 332. Thank you. He has the measurements you would need of a guy like that, and to me, he is one of the few plug and play offensive linemen in this draft. I think you put him at left guard, compare him and put him next to Tyler Smith. You have two gnarly run blocking type of dudes who honestly I call it when I watched Taylor Smith's film last year, to me, I saw a guy who was overly aggressive in the best way possible, in which case he wanted to run to the dirt. Avia on run blocking is the exact same way. He has really good balance and pass protection. He has really good balance on his feet, which is where I think he's better than Osiris Torrance. Because Osiris Torrance, while he's a great run blocker, he's really heavy footed, and that gets you in trouble in the NFL. Avia to me has the best tools and upside of any interior offensive line in this draft. And if he's there at 26, to me, I don't care who else is there. I think he's the pick.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I'm gonna show proof that I actually had
No, you didn't.
Steelers.
No, you didn't.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Now for the second round pick, I really like this guy a lot, and he actually is going to be an official visit for the Cowboys. So that's just good timing. I put this out about a week ago, and
Okay.
this week he's going to take his visit, and that's a guy I really like. And I don't know if you've watched this film yet, but Emmanuel Forbes, the cornerback from Mississippi State. And I know people don't really like these like kind of smaller cornerbacks. He's 6 foot 170, 175. I'm pretty sure he can probably bulk up. People need to stop letting the weight of players really like turn them off of them because in the NFL you can put on pounds. They have these programs set up for people who can put on weight. Okay, so don't let a player's weight deter you from picking them, especially if it's at a position where your weight will matter, but you have time to do that. He's 6 foot 170, but he might be the best ball hawk of all these top cornerbacks. I think he has his best games in man coverage. He didn't have the best look in zone. It looks like he likes to be locked more one-on-one with the receivers, but he has that ability, sort of like a Trevon Diggs, in which case he's able to read the receiver and follow them really well, especially at the first and second steps. Doesn't really get beat deep a whole lot, but he has really solid closing speed, enough that I think could work in the next level. I think he has potential to be a starting nickel guy, especially if they decide to move Deron Bland outside. If they decide to keep Deron Bland inside, Forbes is a natural outside corner, so it works either way. But he has that ball hawk ability that Cowboys really trying to go towards. In the old days, people really wanted these coverage kind of corners. The Cowboys, if you notice the way they drafted corners with Trayvon Diggs and with Deron Bland, they're going for these guys who have hands, guys who have the ability to catch the ball. Forbes has 17 interceptions to his career in college. He is a ball hawk and maybe the best ball hawk in the draft, maybe alongside the same lines of a guy like Clark Phillips from Utah. But I think Forbes at 58 would be a great pick.
I agree. And then add on to it, out of those 17 interceptions, 6 of them he took to the
Yes,
house.
he did. He did have 6 touchdowns. Yes, he did. Did you? You didn't have him. You didn't have him there, did you? You picked him at 58.
Yes, I've been a fan of Emmanuel Ford for a while. Not
Okay. Okay. Well, what I want to do after I give you this third guy, I want us to do like a brand new one with new names. But this third guy, I don't know if you've seen him yet, but I went nose tackle. I went guy who's a stretch nose tackle, three technique guy. His name is Keanu Benton from Wisconsin, and to me, he is one of the more underrated but higher rising defensive tackles in this draft. He doesn't really have the athleticism of a first round kind of guy, but he has the strength and nastiness and run stuff and ability you love from a nose tackle. He's primarily going to be a one technique guy, but I think he's a guy if you wanted to, you probably could put him at three tech, maybe more like a lineup 2 or 2I type of tackle, primarily in pass rush situations on that kind of thing. And run downs, you definitely want him on the center because he definitely has that kind of ability to him. He's more, think of him like a Jonathan Hankins kind of light.
I can see that.
And I think and I think having him on this defensive line, whether it's next year, the year after that, or wherever, combining him with Quentin Bohanna, Jonathan Hankins, potentially Carlos Watkins in that nose tackle room, or he can even play some three tackle along with Osa Digizua or whoever else they keep, because we don't even know who they're going to keep at the defensive tackle position. That's up in the air. But I love Keanu Benton from Wisconsin. I don't know if you've watched his film yet. I'm sure you've probably heard the name at this point.
Yeah, I heard the name.
But he's a guy that I really, really like.
Okay, so we did have a different third round. So my third round is Ivan Pace, the linebacker out of Cincinnati.
Oh yeah. You want the speedy linebacker? I got you.
Yeah, I want that type of guy. Like,
okay,
he reminds me of, like, he's in that realm of the Dexter Coakley's and the Dak Gwynn type of those.
He tested similar. He tested similar to Damone Clark.
And I need to check that. You're on to something right there.
And one thing. I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So one of the things I noticed about his game is he sheds blocker, and he's only like 5'10", about 235. Mm-hmm. Usually guys like at that size struggle, but he's like, it's like second nature to him. And when he shoots out the gaps, well, like, you have a really good defensive line. Mm-hmm. He's a menace when it comes to playing linebacker.
Hey, that height thing never really bothered players like London Fletcher. Sometimes those smaller guys really is an advantage because you're able to get lower than a lot of these taller, high runner kind of guys. And he says 5'10", 230. He tested similar to Damone Clark. Obviously, Damone Clark is, he's a lot more of like the prototypical size.
Yeah.
But he has that speed ability, like you said. He's able to read the run really well. He's not really going to be he has pass rush ability, but I think at the next level, he's probably going to be used more along the lines of like an occasional pass rusher, probably merely more of an inside kind of guy, using coverage. I wouldn't mind that pick. I picked a linebacker a little bit later in the draft just because I didn't think this was a great linebacker draft to begin with. So I think you could afford to take a later round guy on a guy you can develop because I like our first 3 or 4 linebackers ahead of him anyway. But that's just me.
I get you. Yeah, I just noticed about Dan Quinn's defense. He's always doing rotational moves, and I was like, if we have him there with Damone, LVE, and Devin Harper, you got a good linebacker rotation. Hopefully, Jabril Cox can, because I was a fan of him coming out of LSU.
One thing the Cowboys fans have to remind themselves is that since the Cowboys defense, they use a lot of guys who have position flexibility. So the Cowboys are used to keeping only 5 linebackers. I mean, a lot of times the last guy or even those 2 last guys, a lot of times are special teams players. Those first 3, obviously Micah Parsons is listed as a linebacker. He's going to play more of like an outside edge / modified Sam. He'll play some inside linebacker. They'd be stupid to only primarily play him as an edge. But he's very valuable in that box area. Leighton Vander Esch, obviously the team's best inside linebacker. And then you got players like Damone Clark with a lot of upside. Jabril Cox, we'll see. And then you have Devin Harper, who actually had a really nice start to the season as a special teams player. His season obviously ended premature. A guy that I really like, obviously, we have Marquise Bell, who practiced a lot with the linebackers and as the safeties, who plays that sort of similar-esque role that Jaron Kearse does as a modified safety linebacker hybrid. And obviously that'll obviously tell where the Cowboys think they're in the position of linebacker at the time. Now in time versus later. Yeah. But I think that's a little early for a linebacker. But I wouldn't hate the pick just to put respect on Pace's name because I like his upside as a potential like starter. I think he might be more of a will linebacker. I don't know what you think. Now I think just because you and I agreed on the first couple picks, we should do like a whole new one. It can be
Okay.
like you can be like we'll pick two different names at 26, 58, and 90. Like, 'cause
Okay.
there had been someone else you were thinking at 26.
Yeah. I'm gonna honest. I'm gonna stick to getting another offensive lineman on 26.
I
And
think I
that's
know who you're going. I think I know who it is, but go ahead.
John Michael Smith.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, when you look at it, this some of our best offensive line these past 10 years came from the Big Ten school. And you
Hmm.
look at a John Michael Smith who has a lot of experience, plays guard and center. That's what the Cowboys looking at an offensive line. You gotta have that versatility. He
He's
plays
nasty.
physical. Yeah. And you gotta have a nasty player. Like you had the Travis Frederick. I know a lot of people when we
Hmm.
first drafted, they're like, why we drafted center in the first round? And then after he played them a few years he was with us, they're like,
Hmm.
man, he's one of the best centers we had in a long time.
We had the same reaction to Travis Frederick that we had at Tyler Smith, whereas like we
I
feel
agree.
the need. We liked the pick in terms of if it was like in the second or third round. We just didn't like the player in the first round because remember everyone
Yeah,
was like Travis Frederick might be the best center in the draft, but
yeah,
everyone was talking about him being a second or third round pick. He turns up he might be a Hall of Famer. Who knows? Who knows by the end of it all? And Tyler Smith obviously had a great rookie season. Now, for
he did.
my other guy at 26 is my favorite cornerback in this draft. My cornerback one. He won't be the first cornerback taken, but I think the best pure man coverage cornerback, Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State.
Man,
I
that's
think
a
he
great
is
one.
I think he is the best pure man coverage cornerback in this draft. He has the lengthy one. He has solid. I think he's about 6'1", 6'2", 200.
Mhm.
So he stacks up right up there with Trayvon Diggs, but he gives you a lot more of that man coverage ability that people may say Trayvon Diggs lags, even though I think, obviously, if you look at the numbers, he got better last year than the year before that. He didn't have the same kind of ball hawking ability, but he can make plays on the ball. He has a good eye for it, eye on the quarterback. Um, he has the ability to play his zone if you want him to, but I think he's much more. I think he's best suited as a man coverage cornerback. If you play him in zone though, that's going to take away a lot of his like best physical abilities. I think he's a pretty solid run defender, not the best run defender, but a solid run defender. I think he's a good tackler. It's really more about reading the run, especially when it comes to the outside. But that's who I think it would be at 26,
Yeah,
and that my second option.
hey, those are both good options.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we get any of those guys, I'm gonna be happy. I'm gonna automatically give it an A.
All right. What about 58? Who is you have a backup option?
Man, 58. Let me think. Ooh, that's a good question.
Give me a name. Give me a name.
I gotta think of a. I'm over thinking of a name real quick. You got one? And
I
come on.
Okay, so I do. I don't think they would do this because first of all, I'm gonna tell you right now it's a tight end. Okay,
Okay.
so I tweeted out last week that the Cowboys, since Jerry Jones has been the owner, they've drafted 19 tight ends. 13 of those tight ends were drafted from the fourth round or beyond. So typically they like these guys who are later on, just because if those that don't know, the tight end is the position that more often than not takes the longest to develop. And teams would rather not invest a higher draft pick into a player who can help this year as opposed to a player that they'd have to develop down the line anyway. Like Jake Ferguson, really last year, a lot of people thought would be a second or third round tight end. They got in the fourth round, and that's great value in my opinion. Um, but just because, like, if he can't help year one, why take him?
Yeah,
But so my guy Sam Laporta from Iowa, the tight end,
I start watching the film.
one of the I think he might be the best tight end after the catch in the draft. I think he's the best pure over in terms of like run blocking and run blocking and receiving tight end in the draft. Uh, I don't think he has the same upside that a Michael Mayer from Notre Dame does, but I do think he has the upside of a player who can be a tight end one for you. As a receiver, he's dangerous after the catch. He has the ball in his hands. He'll get you 5, 6, 7 yards minimum every single time. He's a decent route runner, but obviously at Iowa, since route running really ain't the thing they teach, he would need to develop that a little more. He's a great blocker. I would probably say probably more inline as opposed to setting the edges. I think he definitely needs to work on that a little bit. Sort of similar to what Jake Ferguson's issues were last year, but he had another thing. He has a speed. I think he had the second fastest 40 in the combine, and didn't really show up on tape. Oh, he's not. He doesn't look that fast. But the problem is he's just a hard runner. And that if he has the open space, you can actually see it from that big body, 6'4", 245, good size for your tight end. And since you're going with these younger guys like a Jake Ferguson, like a Peyton Hendershot, having a guy like Laporta there, right there to develop right along with him, why not? Especially a guy if you want to adapt this new zone blocking type of running team where you're going to run 2 and 3 tight end looks. Why not have a guy like him out there? I think I would really like him at 58.
Okay. So I actually thought of my 58 pick. I'm gonna go with Zach Charbonnet, UCLA running back. He kind
Everyone
of
likes him.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that he's not going to break out for the big yards, but he's one of those guys that's going to get those 5 to 6, 8 yards, and he can be a goal line type of back, and he plays physical, and he can catch that ball, do the quick dump off and throw it to him. I think he'll be a good complementary running back with Tony Pollard.
Now as far as Charbonnet goes, this might be because Pac-12 doesn't have a whole lot of great overall defenses outside of like Utah in them or even Oregon, but like he did average over 6 yards a carry, catch or running
Mm-hmm.
in his career. So and again that might be because UCLA typically has usually a lot of good offensive linemen, or because the Pac-12 doesn't have a whole lot of overall good defensive players each week. But that is something worth saying. I don't think he's a second round type of running back, but if they did take him there, I could definitely see why. Especially just because you're right, he has that upside of potentially being your running back one if they decide not to move forward with Tony Pollard.
And one thing, he did actually play for Michigan as a rotational back a couple years ago, so he does got that experience playing against Big Ten talent.
Okay.
So,
All right. So what about 90? You finish this. You finish up with 90. Come on.
okay, so I already got my 90. So I'm gonna actually go with tight end Luke Shoemaker out of Michigan. He's a,
Okay.
he's that inseam type of tight end. He kind of fits that cowboy mode. He's 6'6", about 250. I don't know why I said 250, but he's one of them that can grab one of those guys. Like you throw it to him, he's gonna get those few yards. He's not as refined as like the Sam Laporte. I actually like Laporte's game. He kind of reminds me a little bit like a young Jason Witten in a way, but Shoemaker is kind of that guy that I think he has a little more oomph than we have with Dalton Schultz.
Okay. Shoemaker to me again. I think that's a little bit of a reach in the third round, but I
I get
mean, but I think if they really want a tight end and he is the best on your board available, you take him, and that's okay because this is a good tight end draft.
it.
All right, I think it's gonna be fourth round or later till we see a tight end, just because that's what history is telling me that the Cowboys are gonna do that. So that's why I ain't gonna mock a tight end to them until the fourth round at the earliest. That's just me. But I mean, if they went with Sam Laporta, my guy in the second round, they have taken those guys if they're there. So like I could definitely see him going second or third round as a tight end. Now, just to reiterate, your first, second, third was John Michael Schmitz, and then Zach Charbonnet, and then Luke Shoemaker.
Yes,
Shoemaker, yeah, I can never pronounce his name right. I'm sorry.
I
So
like it.
mine is Joey Porter Jr. and then this is the redo, obviously. Joey Porter Jr., Sam Laporta, and for 90, I went with a wide receiver. I went with a guy just in case they decide to move on from one of their two guys with Gallup or with Cooks. Or maybe Jalen Tolbert ain't that guy. Simipo Hoko doesn't develop. Dennis Houston is only a practice squad guy. The thing is, they need receivers anyway. So I would have had them get another receiver regardless. And I liked this guy a lot more before the combine. And now it feels like he's just his stock is rising. So I feel like I have to get him a third round. And that's my guy, Marvin Mims from Oklahoma. I think
know.
because you know ball.
Yeah.
I think he is one of the best second level separators that you in the draft. This ain't really a great receiver draft, but you have a lot of guys that are in that first, second, third, fourth round who have decent upside as a solid wide receiver 3 or 4. Sorry, wide receiver 2 or 3. Mims, his best attribute is speed. He's a very fast player. Does a solid job of high pointing the ball. A lot of that might be because like the Big 12, like they had like these off and on secondaries. I think he did. Obviously, I saw the Texas film. They did crappy against Texas this past year, regardless. So no one really looked good in that one. But Mims, I really like as a second level separator, sort of like, if he can develop his route running ability off the line of scrimmage, because he has a hard time separating right off the gun. He's more of like, once you get 10, 15 yards on the field, he can separate. These guys who can separate before the first 5 yards are those dangerous guys. If he can develop that along with his speed, he ran a 4.38, I believe. And I like him as that wide receiver 4, maybe a deep threat rotational guy his first year or two. I like him a lot, especially at 90.
Yeah, no. One thing about him is like, you know how you with Brandon Cooks, he could play slot and outside. That's what you could do with a Marvin Mims. He plays bigger than he actually is. I
Yeah.
watched a little bit of the film, like man, and he's like 5'11", about 170
He's
sometimes.
very average size. I think he's like 5'11", 180, 185. Very average size receivers. Not too big, not too small, just very average. Like you said, speed is his best attribute.
It is.
Yeah. because once he gets past like that 10, 15 yard separate from the line of scrimmage, that's when he starts to create the separation. That's when he's dangerous because he has the open field to work with.
That's one thing I was seeing about this film. Like, okay, this I'm a Texas fan, but when I see talent, I got to give it his props. I don't care what school they come from, and that's one thing I noticed. Marvin Mims can play, and I wouldn't mind him in the third round. So our last thing we're going to talk about. I know you do a lot of media work and stuff, especially with the XFL and things going on.
Mm-hmm.
What is like your most memorable media moment?
My most memorable media moment. Okay, that could be at any point, right?
Yeah, any point.
Okay. I have a small few of them, but I'm gonna leave one off the table because I feel like it'd be a little controversial if I
Okay.
put that out there.
I was
But
gonna
one I will mention that I really liked a lot. I was working a few years ago. I was working a Kansas versus Texas Tech basketball game, and this is when Kansas came down to Lubbock. I was working the game. I was covering them with Raider Division when I was working there, and I got to meet Coach Self and Joel Embiid and Andrew Wiggins. This is obviously that year where they had those two and they were doing everything for them, right? And so as soon as the Tech players and their coach leave, at the time it was Kirby Tubby Smith, excuse me, Tubby Smith. At the time, after they leave, here comes the Kansas player and their coach, and it goes from sad face because Kansas won the last shot, the last second shot, to this like huge elation. And Joel Embiid, I had never like actually heard him talk in person before. I thought maybe like there's something distorted there. He had the biggest grin. I got to ask him a question, and I said like that Hugh and Andrew were like contributed the most points to this game. Like how much did that factor into it? How much was y'all just like going along? And he said something along the lines of that's just how we are. That's just how we are. And until people can stop us, we're gonna keep doing it. And I don't remember how far. I think they made it to the Elite Eight that year. But that was actually pretty cool, especially considering like how big of a star he is in the NBA now. One of my favorite moments is like when I was working Raider Vision I was the same year actually. I worked a Tech game, and that was when Pat Mahomes was the quarterback. Pat Mahomes he was a goofball. Yeah, no, he wasn't mean. I was actually working the field. I was working with the camera crew that time, and I pointed at him. He said, "Hey man, can we get some for the fans?" And he goes over there and he's like, "Yeah, I got you." And he goes to get a little wave, and gets a little point at the camera like that, does all this goofy stuff. And I said, okay. And then when I told him, okay, we're out, he said, "Man, I appreciate it." And like that, and that was the first time I actually heard him talk, because I never actually like listened to the press conferences from them because they wouldn't let me in there for football because like football is a lot tighter access than basketball at that time. But you actually hear him talk. I'm like, is that what he sounds like? That was the first time I actually heard him talk, like heard him talk in person, and I didn't say nothing about it. I was just like just taken back.
Yeah, his
And that's
voice is interesting.
Yeah, and this is before obviously he became a star even in college football because and for those that remember in college football he became a big star just because he had like this really famous game against Baker Mayfield in Oklahoma. To me, I worked that game. That was a terrible game. I hated that game. It was like almost 5 hours. The defense couldn't tackle nobody. It was back and forth, back and forth. That wasn't fun for me. But that's what really put him on the map.
Yeah, he was kind of like that unknown guy nobody really talked about until, like you said, that game is like.
And then he blew up.
Yeah, as a kid out of White House, Texas, and nobody really knew him. I think he was only a 3-star recruit out of White House.
I think he might have been a 4, but yeah, he was highly recruited in the state, not as much so like nationally.
Yeah, and little people notice like I feel like Texas is that quarterback powerhouse. If you think about all the quarterbacks in the NFL right now that are from Texas.
Oh yeah, I mean, like for 2 years in a row, it was Baker Mayfield, and then obviously Pat Mahomes in that draft, and then Kyler Murray gets drafted, and this year I can't remember if there's a quarterback from Texas getting drafted this year.
I think Clayton Tune is the only one that comes to my mind.
Yeah, it ain't as like great a quarterback draft. Like even the first round quarterbacks, like it's really more of like a toss up.
Yeah, It's just like, oh, it's like you gotta have, they're like, well, we gotta have one of these, some of these quarterbacks in the first round, and that's how. Yes, sir. But yeah, I appreciate you, bro, for being on the show. But
Always.
yes, sir, we definitely got to do another show again. But I just want to get the floor to you so you can let everybody know where they can catch you out, check you out at on everything.
All right, you can see my handle at the bottom at Shane Carter TX. I'm found at all social media at that handle. You can catch my right now at Defiant Takes Football. We're taking off from there. Formerly A to Z Sports. I got nothing but love for them.
Yes, sir.
Some of y'all might recognize my voice a little bit from NFHS because, as he told you, I do a little bit of broadcast. I'm a producer and a broadcaster for NFHS. Covered a lot of Texas high school sports. Love doing that, especially. And yeah, drop me a DM. Can't guarantee I'll answer it, but I'll definitely see it.
Yes. Well, honestly, he's good at DM you back. It just he's busy, so you got to be patient.
Yeah,
Yes,
if
sir.
I if I message you back.
Yes, sir. But this has been Tacos and Touchdowns live. We'll definitely be having a show next week, but y'all have a good one. Peace.
Peace.